Now, let me tell you, when I say the summer of 1913 was hot, I don't mean the kind of hot where you sip on iced tea in the shade. I mean the kind of heat where you can fry an egg on the sidewalk and turn people's tempers up hotter than any election year. You can't find anything hotter or more fiery than a dusty little patch of land north of Lincoln where thousands of folks showed up hoping to, pick hops and earn a few extra bucks. And it wound up starting one of the wildest labor showdowns in U.S. history. I'm talking about a day that a harvest turned into a full-blown pandemonium and made headlines across the country. It was called the Wheatland Hop Riot of 1913, and it all happened just north of town, about 10 miles away. Agricultural work in the hop fields was amongst some of the most strenuous and poorly paid labor that a worker could undertake in the early 20th century America. The situation of the hop pickers who worked at the Durst Ranch, the single largest employer of agricultural workers in the state, was no different. Now, the owner of the ranch, Ralph Durst, advertised too widely for hop pickers in the 1913 harvest season. He got 1,000 more people, actually, than he needed, which had an effect on, of shrinking an already low wage scale, right? It's not really a scale. So the Hop Riot was one of the first major labor confrontations in American history, but it was far from the last. So just picture it, right? It's late July in 1913. The Durst Brothers Hop Ranch stretched as far as the eye could see. Green vines crawling up poles like they were trying to escape the valley heat. Over 2,000 workers poured in from every corner of the West, men, women, even children, chasing that good old promise of an honest day's pay for an honest day's work. But promises, as it turned out, were about as thin as the soup they were serving. The desired pay was a measly $1.25 per 100 pounds of hops, minus 10% for a spot to pitch tent. Other farm workers in other fields were making around $2 a day for labor, and it didn't, with Durst, it didn't matter how many people were working with you. You get that 100 pounds, you would have to split up the $1.25 with the other workers. The water was foul and the food was so bad. One worker said that if the worms don't get you, the stew meat will. To raise morale, one of Durst's cousins sold watered down lemonade, so they didn't have to drink the foul water, but he charged a nickel per glass, so, it wasn't really any favor. Now, the Durst brothers, who were well-off ranchers with more thirst for money than compassion, figured they could treat the workers any way they wanted to. And they chose to treat them, like they were subhuman. They even charged their families to pitch tents and made everyone buy food from the company store. And that was usually rotten. On top of that, the ranch apparently withheld a portion of each worker's pay, about 10%, that would only be released if the worker stayed through the end of the harvest. This is kind of a shady tactic to lock them in, and the money often wasn't paid when the work was done anyways. Another strange and insidious twist is that a worker might work all day in brutal heat, subpar conditions, and still potentially owe their boss money at the end of the day after buying their family overpriced rotten food from the company store and paying for their rent to pitch a tent. The Durst brothers sound like real humanitarians, right? Anyways, by the time the harvest started, that camp was just boiling hot. Not from heat entirely, but from plain old anger. Then along came Richard Blackie Ford, a fast-talking labor organizer with a silver tongue and a knack for stirring folks up. He was part of the industrial workers of the World Union, or the Wobblies, as they used to call them. Now some say that Ford could sell a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves, right? He'd gather the pickers under a big shade tree, and thunder on about fair wages and decent food and clean water, things most people figured shouldn't require a revolution to get. So Durst didn't like that one bit. He wanted his hops picked and not his workers organized. So he called the county sheriff and said, you better get him out of here before he plants more than hops in the fields, right? So it was Sunday, August 3rd, 1913, a scorcher of a day. And the workers gathered for a meeting, maybe 700 or 800 of them, all crowded under the sun. Ford was up front shouting about justice and dignity. At the meeting that day, it's recorded that speakers addressed the crowd in English, Spanish, German, Greek, Arabic, so try and visualize that, right? Workers from many ethnicities under the hot sun gathering for what may have been one of the first multi-ethnic labor meetings ever. And just as he got to the good part, right, when the crowd was cheering, stomping, clapping their hands, in comes the sheriff and the district attorney and a few deputies ready to arrest Ford right there, But the crowd wasn't having any of it, right? People yelled and shouted as people became visibly aggravated and, circled like piranha around blood. And then somebody fired a shotgun. We'll never know exactly what did happen, but some accounts say that the deputy or sheriff fired a shotgun into the air to disperse the crowd, and that triggered the mob. Others say a hop picker was disarming a lawman before being killed. But whatever it was, the sound, turned that crowd into a stampede. Shots rang out, people ran in every direction, dust flew so thick it turned the day into dust. When it was all over, a worker, a deputy, the district attorney, who's actually Durst's friend, so anyways, and a young boy all lay dead, with many others wounded, including the sheriff himself. So, and that's how a protest turned into what the papers would call a riot. Within hours, the place would be crawling with lawmen, right? Soldiers, reporters. The National Guard even rolled in with rifles gleaming, bayonets shining like they just find themselves a real war to fight. But, dozens of workers were arrested. Some got dragged from their tents. Others were beaten in town just for being part of the harvest. Richard Ford and his buddy Herman Sir were hauled off, tried for murder, and sentenced to life in prison. But here's the kicker, right? The evidence was flimsy as wet toilet paper. Even years later, most folks agreed the wrong men took the fall on that one. So after a long campaign by labor activists and, a whole lot of public outrage, both men were pardoned in 1925. Then the legend grows gigantic because of misinformation. It's a pretty common thing. So after the riot, newspapers went wild with rumors and propaganda. The riot shocked the public, right? And two officials and several workers are dead. And, the press, especially the San Francisco Chronicle and Sacramento Bee, was eager to sensationalize the whole thing and just to sell newspapers, right? The San Francisco Chronicle and the Sacramento Bee ran stories portraying Blackie Ford as a dangerous anarchist connected to the Industrial Workers of the World, Union, which was already being branded as un-American and radical. So one of the more ridiculous claims appeared in several editorial-style columns around the late August of 1913, claiming that when authorities searched Ford's belongings after the riots, they found a secret manifesto written in invisible ink revealing a plan to overthrow the ranch owners of California. So no evidence was ever found of such a document. There was actually, back at the time, there were several science fiction things going on, or, spy stories, and, it was just the big hot thing to write in invisible ink. So they kind of, hyped off of that. So anyways, there's, no evidence of anything, in any document ever existed. No mention of it appeared in the official court proceedings, trial transcripts, or, even the California Commission on Immigration and Housing in 1915, their report, which investigated the riot in detail. So historians today recognize that as a rumor and as fabricated anti-union propaganda. So most likely it was fabricated by an overzealous reporter trying to tie Ford to the broader movements of the time. So by the time the dust settled, the Wheatland Hop Riot had changed California forever. The state launched its first serious investigation into farm labor conditions and created the Commission on Immigration and Housing, the first step towards modern labor protection. You could say that out of the chaos, something good did finally grow out of it. Maybe not the hops for beer, but a little bit of hope at least. So, all right, reality check: truth versus legend. So here's the truth. The Wheatland Hop Riot really did happen on August 3rd, 1913, in the Durst Brothers Ranch between Lincoln and Wheatland. A worker, a deputy, and the district attorney and a young boy were shot dead, with many others wounded, including the sheriff. Richard Ford and Herman Surr were convicted and imprisoned, but later pardoned in 1925. There was no evidence; they just tossed him in there. So true. The riot inspired California's first investigation into farm labor abuses and the creation of a new worker protection laws. So, here's the only legend part of it, right? The story that Ford carried a secret manifesto written in invisible ink. That's totally bunk. It was made up by the San Francisco Chronicle trying to sell newspapers. Not true. So, the next time you drive past Gliding Road and see those rolling fields, remember 100 years ago, they were the site of, California's wildest, hottest, and most important fights for fairness in U.S. history. It's proof that sometimes even the smallest towns like Lincoln, Wheatland, history can rise up and make a whole lot of noise. So, and that's the true story of the Wheatland Hop Riot of 1913. So thanks for watching Another Strange Stories of Lincoln. Keep your eye out for the next episode. If you like this one, share it with somebody who cares about our town or simply likes storytelling. As always, I'm Mike Crossfield, a local business owner trying to build a stronger Lincoln together. So thank you very much.